just want to do a real quick video on something I think which is really important, which a lot of people forget when looking for a new bike and considering geometry and bike fit and that type of things. So most people go by stack and reach, which is given off the geometry chart. Now there's one really other important thing which is on most geometry charts, but people don't really pay much attention to, and it really dictates how you fit the bike, and that's seat tube angle from the BB to the vertical, or from the horizontal it's measured. And why is that important? Well, you can have two bikes with the same reach, which is the horizontal distance between the BB and the bars, or the top of the head tube, and they can feel completely different to ride, and that's because of the seat tube angle. And the reach on the geometry charts doesn't take that into account. Everything measured reach is forward of the BB. So you can have two bikes with a reach of, say, let's think 380 millimeters or 400 millimeters. When you're sitting on the bike, you could feel really stretched out on one and quite cramped on the other, and that's to do with seat tube angle, because the reach doesn't take that into account. The reach figure is only measured forward of the BB. So you could have a bike with a reach of 350 millimeters, and actually that means the saddle could end up like technically it could end up a mile behind you, and it'd still have the same reach, because seat tube angle, which is the angle from the horizontal and the seat tube, isn't taken into account. So you need to pay attention to seat tube angle. Having a really slack seat tube angle as opposed to a steep one makes the bike a lot longer when you're sat on it, even though the horizontal distance, the reach from the BB to the top of the head tube, is the same. And I've got an example here of two different bikes which have a very similar reach on paper from the BB to the top of the head tube horizontally, but feel completely different when you're riding them. And it's to do with the seat tube angle and the setback of the seat post. So on this one I've got quite a relaxed seat tube angle. I don't particularly like that, I like it to be steeper, and there's a setback on that seat post, and I've got the seat slammed all the way forward to try and alleviate that. On this one I've put a straight Thompson seat post with no setback, and I'm running the saddle quite far forward as well. And although the reach of this bike is probably slightly longer than this one, the steeper seat angle and the zero setback seat post makes this, for me, a lot more comfortable to ride. And why is it important in terms of biomechanics? Well, having a laid back seat angle and a fairly long reach really closes the hip angle. At the top of the pedal stroke, the hip can be really tight, and for most kind of amateur cyclists that don't practice every day and don't stretch every day and sit at desks every day, is that the front of the hip flexors get really short and they get quite tight, and that actually means that most of us have quite bad hip and glute pelvic control, and closing the hip angle is just going to make things worse, and it can give you lower back pain and knee pain. So yeah, although on paper, not looking at the seat tube angle, these bikes look the same, this one is more comfortable because of the seat tube angle. And when I make my bike company, I'm going to publish two reach figures. I'm going to have reach forward and reach aft. So reach forward will be the normal one, horizontal distance from here to here in the X direction, and reach aft will be here to the top of the seat tube, and that horizontal distance will take into account for the seat tube angle. And then when you look at those two figures, you'll be able to figure out where your handlebar to stem, seat tip to top of stem is relative to the bottom bracket. Are you going to be here? Or are you going to be here? So on this bike, the reach from tip of the saddle to the bars is 590 millimeters. Now I know, because of the seat tube angle being quite steep, that's fairly forward. On this, it's exactly the same, it's 590 millimeters, but it's further back relative to the BB. So what does that do? It closes my hip angle at the top of the pedal stroke, puts me further back, which from a handling point of view is good because it gives me more 50-50 weight distribution over the bike. Maybe on this, my weight is a bit further over the front wheel, which people could say is not great for descending, and you don't want to load up the front wheel too much. But for me it's more comfortable like that. So when you're buying a bike, or if you're having a bike fit or changing a bike, pay attention to your current seat tube angle. If you feel your hips closed up too much and you're too stretched out, then maybe look at getting a bike with a steeper seat tube angle.